Okay. All right. Well, thank you all for showing up for the Breaking into Social Impact panel. Super excited for our guests. Most of you are Odyssey members, but if you're not, just quick background. Basically, I was a first generation college student trying to break into finance, and it was just an awful process. And finally, someone came in and became a mentor. And it made me think there has to be a better way to help facilitate those connections. And that's what Odyssey is about, because there's professionals out there who want to help, and we want to provide the tools for them to connect with you. So you can just log in and click the book, 30-minute slots of office hours from professionals for all different fields. If you're not on there, it's free to join. Everything's free. And we host events like this and have different job postings, et cetera. So hope to see you on there if you're not on there. I think the best way to start this panel would just to get a quick intro from each of the panelists. They each have their own pretty unique social impact panels, social impact business. So would love to hear both, just a quick intro about yourself, but also about the business itself. Jessica, do you want to go first?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Jessica Donig. I'm the co-founder and executive director of an organization called Miracle Messages. And Miracle Messages helps people experiencing homelessness reconnect to social support. And if that sounds a little strange to you, why social support? The answer is that homelessness is an extremely isolating experience, alienating experience. Many people don't have social support, and that's why they become homeless. But also just the experience of homelessness, there's a lot of shame associated, a lot of negative emotions, and a lot of social stigmatization that occurs. And so we help people either reconnect with their loved ones who they don't know how to reach, overcoming digital literacy barriers, digital access barriers, or emotional barriers. And we also help people connect with a supportive friend through a one-to-one buddy system called Miracle Friends. And we just started offering direct cash transfers, sort of a universal basic income type of model called Miracle Money for people who are experiencing homelessness, who really are just experiencing poverty and they need support combined with some cash. So Brian, should I launch into my story or should I just stick with that for now?
Sure. Yeah. I would love to hear your story. I think it's good context for everybody. So now would be a good time for it.
Okay. So I'll just start with, I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area and really wasn't thinking about social impact too much until I got to college. And my revelation in college was that I took a course as a freshman called Work, Labor, and Social Justice. And in that course, we were talking about something called the polarization of wealth. I don't know if you've been exposed to this concept, but basically about how wealth inequality has grown in the United States. And one of my professors, just kind of giving a real world example, said that when she was growing up in the San Francisco Bay Area, there wasn't homelessness. And this was a mind-blowing comment to me because I had lived in San Francisco Bay Area my whole life, and I couldn't conceive of a Bay Area without homelessness. That was my normal. And so I actually went back over spring break and I demanded that my dad tell me if this was a lie that my professor had said in class, because I really couldn't believe it. And what he said to me was, yes, when he was growing up in the Bay Area in the 50s and 60s, homelessness was really not a social problem the way that it is today. It was a few people, but not sort of a massive number of people who couldn't afford housing. And that was kind of the beginning that started to percolate for me because, if something is not permanent, if it hasn't always been that way, it means that it's not inevitable. It can be different in the future. So that was my exposure to the idea. And then after that, I ended up studying sociology. And I took a first job out of college at the East Palo Alto Boys and Girls Club, where I was the director of the academic program. And then from there, I left and did research at Stanford University for a few years. And then through my connections at Stanford, I ended up as the first employee of a startup. And so I kind of got my feet wet with entrepreneurship and the startup world, but I still really carried that mission-driven social impact part of me. And so when I left Call9, which was the startup, I was trying to think, really, what did I want to do next? What was important to me? What did I value? And that was the time where I also moved from Oakland to San Francisco. And for those of you who have not been to San Francisco lately, especially in where I was living in the Mission, you walk out of your door and there are tents lining the sidewalk. And it really drove home to me that this problem is something that needs to be addressed. And I think, both practically from what I had learned in school, and also I think morally and philosophically as a person, I didn't feel like I could be the person that I wanted to be and walk past this every day and do nothing. And that was when I met Kevin Adler, who is my co-founder, and he'd been working on this for several years. He had an uncle who had been on and off the streets for 30 years. And he knew that his uncle was a beloved member of his family. And he also knew that the people that he walked past on the streets must have families and loved ones. And he was exploring what social connection might mean for those folks. And so that's how I ended up at Miracle Messages. I love what Kevin was thinking and what he was working to build. And I was so excited to be able to join him and use the skills that I had from being in startups and what I had learned at my previous nonprofit to support that and to make sure that no one goes through homelessness alone.
I love that story. Thank you, Jessica. I'm glad you gave us the background. Who wants to go next?
I can jump in there, Brian, and also I'm seeing a couple students on here. If you can drop in the chat where you're joining from and what year you are and what university, I would just love to see the where you all are coming from this into this panel. And also shout out to Brian and Jessica and Nico. My name is Beverly Leon. I'm the founder of Local Civics. We used game-based learning to help middle and high school students, as well as their educators, build civic and community leadership skills. I'll go into a little bit more depth later when we open up the questions and panels, but our mission is really to help young people and our young citizens in the United States and eventually other democracies actually begin to participate more meaningfully in our civic lives, begin to scaffold the skills to leading in our democracies, leading in all dimensions of our communities. And we know that that has to start with young people. You don't wake up at 18 and suddenly understand all the spaces and places that your vote counts towards. It's really helpful if you've been connected and deeply engaged in community before we actually get that really important civic right and duty to vote. A little bit about my background. How did I end up on this social entrepreneurship journey? I think sometimes when I think back about how I'm here today working at doing an education and technology company, when I was in high school and even into my first few years of college, it was not even on my radar. This concept that you could be an entrepreneur, that you could use and leverage the resources of your community to actually amplify a social mission or opportunity just weren't the conversations I was involved in. And I actually went to do my undergrad at Columbia. I was on a finance track. Those were the messages that I had learned and sort of internalized as, if you get to Wall Street, if you get into these finance roles, then that is what success is. I spent most of my time and energy trying to get onto those tracks, landed an incredible job at Morgan Stanley where I was able to learn a bunch. I was in equity capital markets. And after a year there, I actually left. And what happened was I was a pretty decent soccer player. And then I had an opportunity to go play professional soccer. And so I had sort of this opportunity where, I had spent most of my academic life and young professional career trying to get into this role, only to leave it for something that was not only high risk, but something I was deeply passionate about. And that felt at the time like the biggest risk I had taken. But as I look back, it's one of the reasons I'm actually doing the work I am today. My experiences playing overseas. I've lived in Iceland. I lived in Verona, Italy. I've lived in the UK, moving through different democracies, having to find community in different spaces, and working and coaching young people in all of those countries really helped me understand the deep challenges we face in education and in our democratic lives to bring young people into those spaces. So when I retired from soccer, a lot of the reflection I was doing was thinking about how can I use my academic experiences, the things I'm passionate about, the professional and career experiences I've had to actually align that with what I'm meant to do, what I was passionate about. How could I use that in service of others? I'd gone back to grad school, so I spent a year studying social policy at Oxford. And that was really the sort of seed of the idea for where Local Civics was. And this was 3 years ago now. I brought that idea into Columbia Business School, where I met Brian, and we can even have a conversation about Odyssey and Local Civics and that ideation. But after graduating last May, so I know many of you may be virtual students, I was fortunate enough to be able to go full time on Local Civics. We've been able to work with thousands of young people, primarily in New York City and Los Angeles, young people in Boston, and help them really engage deeply in community. And I'll talk a little bit more about the curriculum and programming later, but that's what we do at Local Civics. And it's a little bit of how I ended up in this pathway, pursuing entrepreneurship and trying to leverage technology. So excited to be here, and thanks for dropping that info in the chat too.
Awesome. Thank you, Beverly. I love that story. Nico.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And I just go back to thinking, when I was in school, and things can be so overwhelming, like what's your next step? And I just want to give kudos to you guys. A lot of it is just showing up and learning from others and taking the time to learn from people that have done it in the past. And that was huge for me when I was first starting out. My name is Nico again, and I'm the founder and CEO of Sidekick Support Services. Every superhero needs a sidekick. What we do is we provide support services for individuals and families with disabilities. And growing up, I never thought that that's what I was going to do. I studied entrepreneurship. I grew up in a family restaurant business. My grandfather was a Greek immigrant who came over here in 1969, passed along the diner throughout my family. And I was actually the first person in my family to graduate college. And I just had this light bulb pop in my head one day. I have always been passionate about, people with disabilities and, people overlooking them, and, how wrong that was in my eyes, and how sometimes we all need, just support and help, and just someone to look past, and just see us for who we are. And I think that's so important. And that was such a need in the market. And so, I was just working on this in class, my entrepreneurship class, as an idea. I wasn't the best student, but the class voted me as one of the class leaders. And I was like, okay, maybe I'm onto something. And I started doing some more market research and realized, I had parents, getting so emotional about how they just need extra help in the home and support. And I almost felt obligated at that time. Okay, I need to do this. Even if I help one family and give it a shot, at least I can say I tried it. And today we work with about 68 families in, the area, and we provide a lot of different services: ABA therapy, speech therapy, adult services. But really at the end of what we do is we try and help people with disabilities become more independent, become more socially active, and just access to a sidekick. And that's someone who, is really in the field for the right reasons, passionate about making a difference. And, Jessica and Beverly, we don't really do what we do for the money. Yes, we have a paycheck, but this social entrepreneurship is, I don't have jets, I don't have cars, I don't have things, but I feel rich inside because I've been able to make a difference that no one else can take away from me. And that's why I love social entrepreneurship. You can really make a real impact in people's lives, and selfishly take that for you and say, hey, I helped him tie his shoes. He's going to know that for the rest of his life. Or I helped him make a friend. And I think that's what it's really all about. And social entrepreneurship is really making a difference. And, so, I would love to elaborate throughout, but, that's just, my backstory, and, happy to be here. So thank you.
That's awesome. Thank you to all three for the stories. I love kind of the genesis of the businesses and how it intertwines with your personal lives. Also, everybody on here, please feel free to either drop a question in the chat or raise your hand and we can call on you. We did get questions submitted beforehand, and we'll go through those, but we would love to hear from any of you on here, so feel free to jump in. I think one of the common threads among all three stories is that you weren't way ahead of time planning to do this one specific thing, and it was just kind of this winding road to get there. So I think that one of the questions submitted is a good place to start, and you all kind of touched on this, but if we can drill down on how did you know this is what you wanted to do with your life, and what inspired you to pick this over everything else that's out there? I don't know who would like to go first on that one.
I can go first.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Nico.
Yeah. So, I mean, what inspired me to do this was at the time there was Hurricane Sandy in New Jersey and whatnot. My parents owned a restaurant, and my parents opened up the restaurant so people could come, take a nap in the back. They had no electric, so they could charge their phones. And I was a senior at the time, and like Beverly, well, not like Beverly, I was an aspiring professional soccer athlete. I never got to be a professional athlete, so I'm very jealous about that. But that didn't come into fruition me. I played in college, and I just saw like a simple gesture of them helping the community and how much the community appreciated it. And I kind of wanted to be in that position too. I really wanted to make a difference. And that's kind of when I knew, like, all right, let's do something. Let's, you can leave this world, you can't leave with all your valuables and, your jewelry and cars and whatever. What you can leave with is, did you make the world a better place? And you can take that with you, that you really did that. And that's kind of, once my entrepreneurship, professor at the time was kind of talking about that, that's when things kind of clicked with me. And, I said, all or nothing, this is it, let's give it a shot. And we're still doing it 8 years later. So
awesome.
Yeah, and I'll jump in there. Nico, shout out to any soccer players or footballers. I'm biased. Absolutely, sport changed my life. That was when I think about what's the reason I feel excited about entrepreneurship, social entrepreneurship. What are the things that push me? Sport was one of the levers that actually opened up that curiosity, that deepened my excitement about pushing myself. So even as we're building a company, an organization that is driving impact, there are challenges that are deeply motivating, and they're challenges that you have to continually overcome. It's not like, oh, this is my career path and this is great. It's really uncharted territory in entrepreneurship, but that's something that I found really exciting. But to back up a moment, one of the things I do want to share, I've had a lot of different jobs. So I've been in investment banking, in capital markets. I've worked at a startup in Italy, in Verona. I've worked in nonprofits, volunteering my time, coaching, coordinating programming. I've taught, so all of these things, I think a lot of times it's like, how did you decide this career? I actually didn't, there wasn't a moment I sat down and was like, this is the career I'm going to have. It was actually in reflection of having those different experiences, of understanding what I actually loved about working on deals in capital markets, what I loved about designing curriculum and programming for youth and educators on a soccer clinic and sport, and trying to make sense of the skills and opportunities I had to bring those together. So I would say it can be really overwhelming, at least, especially I work with middle and high school students right now, working with college students. And even at every point, even in my career, you're going to consistently be thinking about what are opportunities that you're deeply curious about, what are industries or roles or types of engagement you'd like to have with people. And you're going to find yourself having strengths in some areas, and you're going to find yourself identifying where some of your classmates, your peers, even mentors have strengths in others. And for me, entrepreneurship is actually one of the channels that I saw an opportunity to bring the best of the experiences I've had together. And for the parts of the most challenging parts of that, I'm not an engineer. There's an uphill battle for me to actually engage with people with that expertise and have to be, forward thinking enough to know where I don't have the expertise or knowledge, but nimble enough to know what I need to know. And that's a really exciting skill set that I get to practice every day. And for me, it's actually a little bit like sport. You have to wake up every day and try to solve a new challenge while also growing. So I'm not sure if I fully answered the question, Brian, but I'm still trying to figure out if this is my long-term goal and career. For the moment right now, it's something that I am learning literally every single day. And that's what's really exciting for me, and what I've looked for in actually every job I've had.
That's awesome.
And I feel like I should say that you don't have to be good at soccer to be in social impact. I mean, you can be, but I'm not. But what I wanted to really, add on to is that, I think people in college, the adults around you will say, what do you want to do with your life? Or maybe you feel pressed to be able to answer that question. And I think at 35, I think what you want to do with your life is live it. You want to take the skills that you have and the things that you like to do and apply them to the problems that you are interested in solving. And that can be in social impact. And oftentimes, because we're so problem and solution oriented in social impact, that's a great place for a creative person who wants to solve problems to be. But that can be applied elsewhere also. But what I will say about being in social impact is that the funding structure and the compensation structure is somewhat different. And you can be really creative in a social impact role in ways that I think are more regimented in other industries. So for example, as the executive director and co-founder of a small nonprofit, I have gotten to do everything from design our programs, to design our systems, to be a public speaker, to train and manage volunteers. And that's, part of a problem with social impact, which is that the funding is harder to get. But it's also an amazing part of the work is that you get to lead in different areas. You get to grow in different areas. If you're a creative person, you get to create in different ways. And then, of course, there's this part of filling your soul by knowing that you're solving a problem worth solving every day.
That's great. That's exactly right. I couldn't agree more. I guess one of the next question would be good. Follow point from there is, we had one submitted where it's how to get involved as a freshman in college. And I think you all kind of hit on finding your skills and what you're passionate about, but how do you even get started going down that path and discovering what those strengths are? Like you mentioned, Beverly. I don't know who wants to take that up first.
I guess we can keep the same order. I think it's really hard to find your purpose, and once you have your purpose, you can really take it from there. So I think kind of what others were saying is you have to try certain things. You have to, that's the time where you can go out and try, whatever it is out there. But I mean, your purpose should be clearly defined. And I think once you have that, you can really kind of take it from there and make it simple. I mean, mine is just enrich lives. Yours could be to laugh, to make people laugh. Yours could be to educate. Yours could be, to support, people who are vulnerable. I mean, because I say that because it's so important, because once you do decide what you want to do, you're going to always keep that in the back of your mind and say, why am I doing this? Oh yeah, my purpose. I have a purpose. This is my purpose. And I found this purpose because I tried everything else. And this is what I love the most. And this wasn't a chore to me. If you're not excited about doing it, you're never going to last in your field. And that's not a knock on you. That just might be something that you truly thought you may have liked, but you didn't. So I think, finding your purpose is really important, because that's always something you're going to reflect back at. Not if, but when you get to challenges, because you will get challenges. And I think that's, a little bit not your question, but I think it's in a sense, yeah, it's important to find that.
Cool.
Yeah, and I'll jump in from just the perspective of once you hit a college campus And I think we have a unique insight at Local Civics is that a lot of times I think we wait to ask permission to engage in an opportunity or get experience. You literally have all the tools that you need today to actually start developing these tool sets. I want to understand if students in here, if you have ideas that you're trying to pursue, or you're interested in actually joining and collaborating with others that may have already be working on this track, right? And those are two distinct sort of spaces to start. One, people working on projects in depth or even just in a light way can help you get exposure to different ideas, different methods, different environments where you can learn and keep asking deeper questions, right? That reflection, you don't have to have this fancy internship or career goal in order to actually learn these skills. So whether that's volunteering on local community organizations, working for a nonprofit, working for a small startup, we take interns at Local Civics. And so I'd say you can start literally today. And I think a lot of times we think, well, I need to have all of this stuff figured out before I can start, or I need to ask someone else if this is possible. You can actually create today. And I think that's one of the most exciting parts of entrepreneurship. You don't need to ask for permission. And then the other piece is, and I can answer the question in the chat too. But the other part is just understanding, how do you throw yourself into as many of these learning opportunities as possible? So they might be a couple week projects, they could be long-term, but the more and more you lean into those opportunities, the more and more you'll understand the types of engagements you like to have. If you like working in partnership with others, if you like independently researching, we have different needs across all different spaces. So I would say just don't ask for permission to start trying to learn. You can actually do many things today that I just weren't even in my frame of reference when I got to campus in college. I was saying, well, what do I need to do? Not realizing I had the creative capacity to build right then.
Great.
And I would just add one quick thing. I think college is a great time to start learning to separate what you like to do versus what other people think is impressive or a good idea. If you haven't started thinking about that and making that distinction, start thinking about it right away, because you can really do a lot in the service of other people's, aims for you, in the service of what other people think is important, and it won't take you towards what you're interested in doing in most cases. So really, do a gut check as you're pursuing something. Try different things and do a gut check and say, like, do I like doing this? Or if I don't like doing it, why am I doing it?
Yeah, great point. And thank you, Brian, for the question in the chat. I'm gonna do a quick follow-up for this and then we'll get to your question. Jessica, you just hit on it, like make the distinction between what you want to do and try different stuff. Beverly, you're talking about throwing yourself into these learning experiences. And Nico, you said, like, I tried everything else and I didn't like it. So I think it'd be great if there's just some tactical advice for the students who maybe they don't have their own idea and maybe they're looking for an internship, right? Like, how do you find those experiences where you can get involved, whether it's an internship capacity or like a volunteer capacity?
I think if you reach out to, I think first, I think is if you can find problems that make you tick, problems that you think are, you might have solutions out there, and go to someone in your industry. I mean, Beverly touched base on it a little bit. Everything is at your fingertips. I mean, you could do whatever you need, whether it's LinkedIn, Facebook, and I guarantee you reach out to an industry leader or a program and just say, hi, if I can have 15 minutes of your time, this is what I'm trying to do. Maybe it leads to an internship. Maybe it leads to, who knows, but, and I also think that, in the beginning, it might even be worth it for you to work at some of these places and not get paid, because it sounds crazy, but you'll take so much experience that you can take later on in life, and maybe having more of a long-term approach. I think is beneficial too. I mean, this is not going to happen overnight for you, but if you keep, if you pack your schedule with 3 or 4 meetings a week with people and just pick their brain, and things will start gaining momentum and you'll get clarity on what you really want to do. So that would be probably my suggestion.
And I'll add too, just in terms of what I'm hearing Nico sort of share, is networking is huge. And I think a lot of times we're reluctant to reach out to folks because, well, why would they answer me, or what do I have to share with them? And a lot of times the worst answer you can get is that either they won't respond to you or they might say no. The best answer is that someone will say, yes, I have 20 minutes. Please let me know what you'd like to discuss, but more than happy to connect. And a lot of times you'll find people want to support college students. We think back to when we were an undergrad trying to answer some of the same questions. So don't be afraid to reach out. With that, some of the tactical things, making sure your LinkedIn profile is up to date and professional. I know these sound basic, but those are some of just the foundational points, right? Being prepared. If you do reach out with someone, they might say, hey, send me your resume. We have an opportunity. Is your resume ready? Right? Have you updated it with that awesome project that you just completed in class? Some of those things are just like the basics that if you're waiting or you're trying to figure out where you want to go, working on those is really helpful. And then also attending these types of sessions, right? You are all now networked with Jessica, Nico, and myself. Reach out to us, and reach out when it makes sense for you, right? It might not be this week or this month. It might be in 2 years. It's really simple and a really powerful way to stay connected. When that idea sparks or when that experience needs to come, you've had the connections with folks that are willing to help. So I would say that. And then the other thing is continue doing projects in undergrad. I was mentoring on campus. I worked with a number of nonprofits. I spent internship summers, both either working for Columbia University in an education program and then working in a banking internship, 2 worlds apart. But those worlds have actually collided in a really interesting way for me now. So I would say, make sure any experience you have, even if it's something that you don't particularly enjoy doing, or even if it's an experience that you don't want to go back to, make sure you're taking something away from that you can use in reflection later. And I think sometimes we're just programmed to say, well, I have to do this, and this is the next step, but we're not thinking through the process. So I'll share that as sort of my tips.
And then, I'll just round it out. We take interns at Miracle Messages, and what distinguishes an intern that succeeds versus the ones that fail rarely are the skills that you have to be like a superstar to showcase. It's really being responsive when we ask you to do something, completing tasks, asking questions when you don't know what to do. These are the kinds of things that make you a standout, really, in in internship, but just overall, like the world is separated into people who do what they say that they're going to do, and then everyone else. So, find an internship by, being proactive and asking, and then succeed in your internship by just being responsible and by doing what you say you're going to do. So that's just a tip for managing interns. It really makes a big difference just to, respond to your emails, finish your projects, let people know that you're accountable. And then I would say, from my reflecting on my experiences as a student, looking for opportunities, what I would tend to do would be to kind of think of what skills I had to offer, and then really kind of try, network, of course, but then when I had a chance to talk to someone, explain to them, what made me unique. So for example, I happen to be an artist on the side. I was a good illustrator. I have some design skills. And I would walk into, any place, and I'd be willing to kind of take a little bit of chance and let them know that, because that's a skill set that is unique. And I may not be applying for a position as an illustrator, but they may see value in the fact that I have a unique skill.
Great, thank you. And I know personally, as an introvert myself, it can feel really intimidating to do that cold outreach. But I think just getting in your reps can be really valuable. And that's where Odyssey can be super valuable. There's just professionals on there who are open to connect, and you just can set up some times with them. And because they're on the platform, you know that they're willing to talk to you, and you don't need to fear that risk of failure. But like Beverly said, I mean, the worst case that happens is they don't respond, and you'll get over that once you push yourself out of your comfort zone enough. We've got about 8 minutes left, so I'm going to go to the question from Brian in the chat. And he asked, how do you view long-term structural change, and how do you manage a big picture goal while avoiding burnout? Great question, Brian. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I mean, for us, if you're leading anything, you're riding the ship, right? I mean, you're the one in charge of steering the company, steering things in the right direction. How we view long-term is we have 5-year goals, we have 3-year goals, we have 1-year goals, we have 90-day goals. And we put a lot of thought into that as a team, and obviously I'm leading that. And but I think when things are written down and clear, and this is how we're going to do it, and everyone's feedback is involved, and you got to think of as a leader, you can't be the leader, just forcing people. You have to look behind you and make sure that, your people are with you and they're okay, and everything, that their jobs are going smoothly. And burnout's a big thing. I mean, I experienced it year 3, 4 in the startup. I was still doing everything on my own. But you got to also keep in mind too, that if you're running the show, your health, your everything like that is just as important, because if you're, in the hospital for a week and your business goes out because you're not there, that's really, at the end of the day, it's on you for not setting up a structure, and you can't do everything on your own. You're going to get to that point. And just having things clearly written, I think, have your team behind you, and really taking care of yourself. And it's okay to have fun. It's okay to go hang out with friends. It's okay, to do fun things. And that's sometimes you're building something. I need to spend all my attention to this, but at the end of the day, it might be counterproductive, because you're not, you need to give in time that where you're effective. If you need a nap, go take a nap, because come back strong and refreshed, because you're just wasting your time there. So, really have things out, take care of yourself, and, have your team involved too. And I think that'll really decrease burnout.
Thank you. Jessica or Beverly, do you want to add on to that?
Beverly, you want to take it in the same order?
Yeah, I can jump in. And I think there's 2 parts of that question that I'm sort of hearing back. One is this idea of transformative change in our society, in our communities, perhaps in ourselves, that we might be striving for. And the other is what's sort of coming to me is this idea of burnout. How do we make sure that we can actually get to that goal we might have envisioned? So from the local civics perspective, we have a big vision and mission, right? We're in a crisis of our democracy. There are many different people, millions of people are working on this problem, this challenge, in many different ways. It's a big one, right? There's increasing polarization, not just in the United States, but in many different countries over the world. We have some of the lowest trust in our government. And this is all in the midst of a pandemic and crisis, where our interdependence and interconnected nature is literally at the forefront. So our mission and vision is that literally every citizen can participate meaningfully in civic life, right? And a lot of times we only think about that means we're voting in a presidential election, and the day after that election, great, let's go back to regularly scheduled programming. But for us, that mission is actually every single part of our community. Every individual feels a greater connection and empowerment to engage. That's that's a structural goal that we have, right? How do we strengthen that? And, in order to avoid burnout and also see that as the huge challenge that it is, similar to something like climate change, right? Where we need large coordinated efforts to actually tackle this. I think about it like if you were planning to run a marathon, If you woke up and someone told you you had to run the marathon the next day, maybe you're a runner and this is something you've been training for. Most people, you're not going to be successful. You will probably actually not only be discouraged, but it might be harmful, right? If you got up and tried to do that, you would burn out or hurt yourself. But if you think about how you would run a marathon and think about training for that, it's regimented, it's routine, right? It's building, you might have the marathon data year out. What do you need to do today? And to what Nico was saying is that comes down at literally the daily level. What are our goals for today? What do we need to accomplish this week? What about a month, 3 months, a year? And so you can scaffold out, but continue to be nimble every single day so that you can really make sure you're aligning and working towards that goal. And I think we think about the work we're doing for Local Civics is, in order to get that structural change, we need to make sure every single young person that is engaging in our communities is empowered and has an on-ramp. If we're only supporting students with lots of resources or students that are self-selecting into these opportunities, we're going to be missing most of the people we need to actually be a part of that journey to transform our communities. So hopefully I answered both of those questions. One really important question, but I'm excited to hear that that's where your head is at, because we have to be sort of engaging through those. And last thing I would say is that it took me a little bit of time to realize that, when I was 18, 19, 20, I think that what I had sort of shared or thought to myself was, okay, when I'm older, the experts will figure out how we solve this. There are older people with more credentials that understand how to solve these problems. And I'm telling you that there are a lot of people working on these issues. If we had the solution, it would be here. So if you have the ideas, we need everyone really contributing. And I think that's something that I wish I had known. Okay, you don't need all of these degrees or experiences in order to be creative, to ideate, to start something.
I love that.
Should I add something for 1 minute before we end?
Yeah, please.
All right. So I knew I wanted to go after Beverly because she sparked some ideas in me. So I just, I think especially working in homelessness, we know that the work that we're doing is because of structural inequality. And we know that the real answer to fixing homelessness, addressing homelessness, is affordable housing and addressing structural inequality in the United States and beyond. And so we know every day when we go to work that the work that we do will be a drop in the bucket towards the actual structural issues that exist. But we also know that by doing the work that we do, we're changing individuals' lives. And also, just as importantly, we're changing the story of how people see homelessness, because we are taking a stigmatized population and we're looking at them first and foremost as human beings. And then we're asking volunteers to engage with them as human beings first, and to learn their stories and to get to know them. And part of the idea, the work that we do is important, but the other part of our organization is that we tell stories, and we really hope that we build political will towards addressing structural inequality. And I think it's really important for people that are going into social impact to understand that the reason that social impact has to exist is because things are broken. And that part of what you do is fix things for the people where you can. And the other part of what you do is change the conversation. So definitely both of those are really important, and it is a great question. And then, just in terms of burnout, it's really hard to avoid burnout in our work. And I think the thing that has helped me the most is to really understand where I get energy in the world, to know myself well, so that I can know which things are going to burn me out, so that I can prepare for those, and so that I can spend time elsewhere recharging myself. And I think that, being in social impact, you can get charged up about the mission, you can get charged up about the impact, but you also need to know yourself well enough to know what's going to charge you day to day.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian, for that question. That was a great question to wrap up on, and all three of the answers I really loved. And I just want to take a second to thank Nico, Beverly, Jessica. This has been an awesome panel. Everybody who showed up, thank you for showing up. And really important, you'll get a post event survey. Please fill that out. That helps us have more events like this and helps us have events that are impactful and helpful for you. So please take 2 seconds to fill it out. And yeah, I just want to thank the panelists again and thank you all for joining us. Today was, I really enjoyed it, and social impact is something that's close to my heart. So today, this was awesome.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. And
Thanks,
Brian.
everyone.
Have a great day.